Hey guys, what's up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over Tesla. Let's talk about what happened today and what we can expect, of course, moving forward as per usual. So if you enjoy, don't forget to hit that like button, as it does help a lot. This is not financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. And of course, my membership section on YouTube is live. The link is down below if you're interested in joining for just $2.99 a month, where you get access to all my intraday thoughts, posts, updates, options flow live every single day, as the stock is trading, of course, every single day. So again, if you're interested, the link is down below, so definitely check that out. I'm trying to find the thing that really gave us this like massive gap down this morning. I can't really find it, but whatever. Anyway, so let's talk about it. Right, Tesla down, of course, on the day. Once again, just yet another day for Tesla, down 3.5%, closing at pretty much $150 per share, which compared to the market is obviously an underperformance. We had Netflix report earnings after hours today, down a little bit, even though they completely destroyed the earnings. The guidance was questionable, we'll say. Because not going to report. Anyway, it's not about Netflix. Anyway, so let's talk about Tesla. So what does this all mean moving forward, right? Like, why is Tesla down even more? Well, the main reason Tesla's down even more is because pre-market, it did gap down once again, right? We did have an analyst downgrade once again. And, well, what do you know? As usual, these moves pretty much almost always happen pre-market. And once again, it happened pre-market on that very, very low volume. We gapped back down right underneath the two levels that we held the day before and yesterday and the day before that, right? And we just gapped right back down under them, opened up pretty low. And honestly, relative to the market, Tesla actually did pretty okay. The market, you can see, overall traded pretty weak today, right? Not the strongest performance on the market today, right? Definitely kind of, having some issues, pretty much bleeding out very, very slowly. And, obviously we had the gap down, but intraday, Tesla actually, in my opinion, held up surprisingly well relative to the market intraday. So important to understand that, but nonetheless, keep in mind, we do still have, of course, this gap fill to technically fill that in my opinion, the actual gap itself, we haven't filled. I personally consider gaps truly filled if we pretty much go to pretty much where the closing price of this candle was, which back here, if we zoom in right here, let's take a quick look. The closing candle price of this candle was, where is it? 144.43. So essentially 144.43 to me is truly like the gap fill, which is, obviously a little bit lower from here, right? That'll pretty much be another like 3 to 4%. But, that to me will be like a true gap fill. But arguably what we have filled today more convincingly, we kind of did it over here, but even more convincingly today is, of course, the fair value gap, this massive green box right here, right? We have pretty much went like right into the middle of it, and we are closing pretty much right around there as well. So the fair value gap has been filled. Usually fair value gaps like this do act as a support, as a potential bounce like section, if you will, and we'll see if that actually happens to be the case. But as I was saying yesterday, if we ever lose the low that we had between these two candles yesterday and the day before, most likely we will enter the 140s. That's exactly what happened. We lost it, unfortunately, pre-market. Sometimes it just be like that, and we did come back down into the 140s, closed pretty much, ever so slightly in the 140s, but we of course did come down to the 148 region as well. So could be a little bit more pain ahead, but keep in mind, we are approaching a pretty crucial area here. Again, we have the fair value gap that, is of course filling. We have the literal gap itself, a little bit more below us, right? Just a few more dollars below us. And of course, we still have this, if we go on the weekly, let's say it's a little bit easier to see, this massive trend line that has existed for Tesla, right? That has served as pretty crucial areas that Tesla has not only bounced and, found support on, but, did find pretty substantial bounces both times. Now, will this time be any different? Well, thankfully, we have earnings right around the corner. That most likely will be the caveat as to whether or not we will find that bounce or not, right? So we'll see how that plays out. We'll see what earnings has in store for us in literally just a few days. So that will be pretty much the main kind of thing that I'm sure everyone's eyeballing. Though obviously leading into earnings, from what I read, man, a lot of people are bearish going into this earnings, rightfully so, but a lot of people are expecting this earnings to just be a massive gap down, and then everyone's going to load the boat on that gap down, and then everyone's going to ride up the train. That's pretty much the sentiment I'm seeing across the board right now. So we'll see if that's just, just conveniently exactly what happens or not, right? Who knows for sure. But keep in mind also on the daily chart, we still have, this absolutely like astronomical bullish divergence, right? Now, again, I'm not saying that it's oversold or anything like that. I care about the oversold conditions on Tesla or just really any stock on the RSI, but more importantly, what I care about are these massive bullish divergences where, again, we've been constantly making very obvious lower lows while the RSI has been making higher lows. So it's starting to get a little bit weaker here, right? We definitely need to start finding a bottom somewhere around this area, or else this bullish divergence, pretty much if we ever lose this low right here on the RSI, pretty much below 28-ish, this bullish divergence thesis really starts to fall apart. So that's something you want to be a little bit careful about. It would be ideal to hold this and, for this to kind of go sideways around this general, 150s-ish range up until earnings, and hopefully earnings, gets a spike up. That would be the most ideal scenario to play out this bullish divergence. Will that actually happen? Well, who the hell knows, right? Obviously with earnings, especially with Tesla's earnings, you never really know. It really just depends on what Elon decides to really say that in this earnings. That's kind of what it comes down to. Now, if we go over to the weekly chart, right? Another thing to note here that's important, let me go ahead and remove this because I kept it on just for the video. So now that I no longer, oopsies, need it, we can go ahead and delete it. Let me go ahead and make sure it's actually gone. I think I might have. Okay, perfect. If we go on to the weekly, right, keep in mind, we still have Friday, right? Friday to hopefully close this weekly candle, at least looking a little bit better than whatever the hell this thing is. But, right, the weekly, again, approaching major support on this trend line. That's number one, not too much lower. But, we are approaching some pretty historical lows on the RSI. So, again, keep in mind, right, if we zoom out like this, right, the RSI has only approached these levels only a couple of times, not too long ago, where we approached it right here. You can see around, what was this? Around, the 160s. And we did get a bit of a bounce, right? Not a crazy bounce. We did get a little bit of a bounce pretty much from 160 up to 180, which is pretty decent, right? That in itself is like not a bad bounce, right? What percent is that? It's about, about a 12-13% bounce, right? But, we are arguably now making an RSI. It's even lower than that. I mean, rightfully so, since the stock did go lower, but we are entering historical lows on Tesla's RSI on the weekly time frame. It doesn't get this low this often. There could be, of course, more to go. I'm not saying there can't be, but it usually doesn't get this low on the RSI. Same with the stochastic, right? Look at the stochastic all the way down here, right? It doesn't usually get this low on the weekly, time frame very, very often. And usually when it gets to these extreme levels, and especially if it's been scraping the bottom for this long, kind of like what it was doing back here when, Elon was selling, I'm sure you remember that. It found, not too long after, a pretty sizable bounce. Again, not saying this has to happen, but it seems like the momentum and the, sentiment around Tesla, rightfully so, of course, is extremely bearish. So we'll see. I guess the point I'm trying to make here is we'll see. For instance, I want to remind you about sentiment. Sentiment is important, especially with a stock like Tesla. Remember when we were trading back all the way up here and everyone was screaming for like 300, 400 plus, right? But again, you can go back to those videos, back to these dates, like late last year, something like that, right? Like in December, you can go back to them. I was specifically talking about how, yes, it is a possibility, but the way I look at it is we have to break the 265. And I specifically remember talking about 265 many times. And I said, it is possible. We can definitely go to 400, but a 265 has to break. But everyone was bullish. Everyone was bullish here. Every analyst was bullish. All the price targets were bullish. Everyone and their mother was bullish. And then Tesla, of course, began its pretty sizable correction. Now, it feels like the opposite's happening. Every analyst is downgrading. A lot of people are very bearish on the stock. People are throwing in the towel. Even though, we are approaching what has real possibility of being at the bottom, this 140s range that I've been talking about for a long time, even back when we were trading in the 160s, 170s, 180s up here, right? I said how my main region is, 160s to as low as 140s. That's my main accumulation zone. And I've been accumulating, and I have more accumulation to do in the 140s if we do get there with cash secured puts, right? But keep in mind, the sentiment now is pretty much the exact opposite than it was over here right before we started the correction. Usually stocks work like that. So we'll see if this happens to be that again or not, right? Again, unfortunately, the MACD on the daily chart has flipped bearish, and is continuing that bearish momentum. So that's not ideal, right? Could mean a little bit more pain ahead, of course. But, I do think we're approaching a pretty crucial area here where, if we were to start looking to truly start setting up a base, truly start setting up a bottom, I really believe this 140s range is the place to do that with this obviously massive weekly trend line that I've been talking about for quite some time here. We're approaching that, the gap fill, the fair value gap, the bearish sentiment, bearish momentum, pretty much every analyst downgrading the stock, right? Constantly pushing it down lower and lower and lower. These analysts usually, they follow in tandem with the stock's movement. So if the stock's rising, they're all increasing the price targets. If the stock's falling, they're all decreasing the price targets. It just happens every single time. That's just kind of how it works. But again, sometimes sentiment is important to, take into account on top of, actual market, structure, technical analysis, and, things like that, right? I think that's important to understand, right? On top of this, we have this guy that made a pretty decent post. Sometimes I want to show these kind of posts that I see on Twitter X, right? So this guy says the following: Tesla is barreling towards a repeat of May 2019, right? May 2019, let's go back to that very quickly and see what the hell was May 2019, right? I'm assuming it was this right here. It was actually just before that. May 2019 was all the way, actually all the way back here, right? Where Tesla was tanking, and then of course it did pretty darn well not too long after, right? Same concept over here, massive tank, and then absolute skyrocket, right? Like imagine what people felt back here, right? Imagine how people felt back here where Tesla had a nice rocket, and then everyone thought the bubble is collapsing, everything is exploding, and then look what happened. Tesla tanked right here, pretty much 60% right here, which is pretty astronomical. I can't imagine the sentiment back here. I can't remember anymore what it was so long ago, but and then it explodes upwards. I'm not saying this will happen. I'm not saying this is going to happen, obviously, but just it's important to understand the sentiment is, crucial. But moving back to the post, right? Every single Wall Street bull throwing in the towel, just like back then, and we just need a few more percent to hit the same minus 40%, 45% year-to-date lows as in 2019. A small deployment of robotaxis anywhere and upside volatility in the derivatives market will cascade into the underlying stock, rinse and repeat. 2019 was the year Tesla went to mass market and the stock was down 45%. 2024 is the year Tesla sells autonomy / vision AI and is down 40%. That's arbitrage in the purest sense. So that's kind of interesting. Another interesting thing here from micro to macro, really good person I like to follow, is talk about the general market, which of course, in theory can affect Tesla, right? But only one other time in the last 20 years has a CBOE put call ratio closed the month anywhere near where it is right now. So essentially, a lot of people are bearish. There's a lot of puts being bought. It's getting extremely bearish. And, people are pretty much betting on substantially more downside. A lot of people are betting on more downside right now with this put to call ratio being this elevated to, one direction. What does that actually mean? Well, the market tends to not like to do what most people want it to do. So, if everyone's bullish, market probably wants to start going back down at some point, right? If everyone's bearish, well, I'm sure you get the idea. And, same idea is happening on Tesla here right now. So we'll see how all this plays out, right? Again, I'm still following my plan. Right, if you're curious what I'm doing, I have cash secured puts that are currently in the money that I'll most likely, I don't know what I just pressed, that I will most likely have to, buy shares come tomorrow's close, which I will. I'll probably roll a couple of them for next week as well to kind of get that earnings premium. I have more cash secured puts in the 140s for earnings for next Friday that I'm pretty much just enjoying the premium, right? And I'll happily add in those levels as well, because I think that 140s has a strong chance to be at least a short to medium term bottom, but we'll see. If we lose 140s, things do get uglier. If we lose 140s, I want to make it very clear, if we lose 140s, we're coming most likely back down to these levels all the way down here in the 130s, 120s, probably even $100 itself again. That is a very real possibility, so you want to make sure you understand that. I just don't think it'll happen, but I'm also prepared if it does. I have other supplies, if you will, ready for those levels if we do get there. But of course, against my shares, I will also be selling covered calls. I'll be playing the premium on both sides. I'll get premium for the puts, I'll get premium for the calls, right? I'll get both of them, and it's elevated, of course, with earnings coming up, right? So I'll have, sold covered calls against my shares, pretty much at my cost basis, maybe slightly higher. We'll see how, how it looks like towards earnings, maybe on Monday or Tuesday. And I'll collect premium on both sides. I'm not just letting my shares sit there and just bleed out, right? Whatever shares I do have right now, and plus, of course, the shares I will accumulate on my cash secured puts tomorrow, right? I will sell covered calls. I will sell cash secured puts. If Tesla rockets up, great. My cash secured puts are now pretty much free money. My covered calls, my shares are going to be accumulating price, of course, as the share price goes up, and maybe I'll have to sell some with my covered calls. We'll see how that plays out. If it tanks, great. Covered calls, free money. Close that out for probably 60% profit with the IV decay as well, or destruction, I guess, the implied volatility destruction post earnings that usually happens, right? Especially if the stock hardly moves. And congratulations, you made money on that, realized gains. And of course, you get to now potentially buy cheaper, shares and, quote unquote, average down. Great. And you also made money on those cash secured puts. You're getting paid to average down. That's the way I like to play it, right? I'm getting paid to buy shares and I'm getting paid to hold the shares. So as Tesla stock is doing whatever it wants to do, I'm just selling options against the stock, against my shares and against my cash, essentially. So that's the way I'm playing it right now, in case you're wondering. That's the way I like to do it. And I do it on Tesla because I have a lot of, confidence, I guess, in Tesla in the long run. And the volatility is nice. I do like when Tesla starts being volatile because, it makes those premiums extra juicy to play around with. So anyway, in case you're wondering, that is what I am personally doing, moving into earnings. But with all that being said and done, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button. We'll see what happens. I would say pretty much the most important thing to right now to watch out for is Tesla really wants to recapture the lows that we had the past 2 days, which is pretty much back above 153, 154. Very crucial to recapture that, and even more so, really crucial to recapture the 160s. Those are the most important levels for the bulls to start recapturing. Ideally, we recapture at least this 154 by tomorrow and we get a gap up. That will be the ideal scenario. But the more ideal scenario that I don't know if we'll do tomorrow, that'll require something crazy, is to recapture 160, which I don't think we'll do tomorrow, unfortunately. The downside targets, of course, is, well, if we cannot recapture this 153, 154 area, it turns into resistance, which so far it seems like there's a chance that it may. watch out for the downside to about this 144-ish level for the gap fill, and pretty much closer to the 140 itself for this overall trend line support on the weekly time frame, which is also a very real possibility. So those are the levels I'm eyeballing right now, and those are the levels to pay attention to. And yeah, we'll see what happens with earnings coming up. It'll be a big one. And yeah, we'll see how much of the bad news has been priced in and how much has not. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.